Welcome back to Longevity Lab here at Peak City Gym, the premier resource for fitness over 40 in Apex, North Carolina. I know it's been a while. A lot has happened here at the gym in North Carolina. And for me personally, I've moved. I bought a new house. And so it's just been really crazy getting all that together and trying to produce and get together a podcast.
During the holidays.
During the holidays, yeah. My family came into town as well, separate weeks. So it's just been back-to-back craziness, but we're finally back. I got Shane here with me. And Shane, has there been anything crazy for you this holiday or the last couple of months?
No, nothing's been too crazy. Right now, I think Chloe, she's about to turn 16 in April, so we're finishing up all of her hours for driving on her permit, and then she'll have her license then. So she just got a new car that's sitting in her driveway from her dad, so she's pretty pumped up about that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have Brinley, who is trying to enroll in preschool unsuccessfully last night. But yeah, so there's a lot going on. Of course, Jace right now, just because baseball season is basically over, he still has his training and all that, but there's nothing like major going on. It's just always a busy time and always something going on. But yeah, no keys thrown into any water or holes or anything like that recently, so we're good.
So is Chloe's car like a new car?
It is a new car. So yeah, she was going to get her dad's old car, which was still relatively new and a nice car. But long story short, she wanted something different. And when she was at school, he ended up trading in his car and got her a brand new car. So she's pretty pumped. And
what a lucky young lady.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I got a car from my parents. And so it was like 2003, I think. And I got a 2001 Honda Accord that was actually my mom's. But my dad made an agreement with me he didn't think that I would be able to fulfill. And that made my mom end up losing her car to me, which she was not a part of that deal. But that's a story for a different day.
Well, that's nice. I did not have that luck. I had a 1981 Chrysler LeBaron that I bought from my grandfather. Granted, it was only for $1, but still. This was 2015, I think, or 2012, and it was a 1981. So I was riding in style.
So. That's awesome.
On this episode of the Longevity Lab, we're going to discuss why it becomes more challenging for our muscles to start to build as we age, and how our body starts to slow down with resistance to protein, and what we should do to adapt to that. So before we dig in, I'm curious if you've seen this with your clients. Someone comes in, they're doing what they used to do or what they've been told in the past is most effective, but they're not quite seeing the results that they either were seeing or they're not seeing results that were promised when they...
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, that happens all the time, especially at the, being an over 40 fitness training facility. You're going to have a lot of people who come in and that what used to work for them no longer works, or they've taken some time off, and then when they come back, they're like very disappointed at how far that they seem to have slid. And that can be due to a bunch of different issues, but I know today we're talking mainly about protein, and protein consumption is definitely one of those issues. I'd say the biggest thing that people fail to understand is when they talk about like, well, I guess that's just my age. I guess that's just my age. There are certain characteristics that come along with aging that are preventative. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But as you age, you naturally move less throughout the day. You naturally probably eat less because you're not moving as much, so you're a little less hungry. You've done a bunch of oxidative stress to your body. So all of those things that are, slightly unhealthy, whether it's snacks that you have, or maybe you were a smoker in the past or something like that, that has changed your cells. And even though it might not have an immediate impact, it will, maybe 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades later. And so you're starting to see some of those issues arise where your body is not recovering as much. You've got a reduced hormonal levels pretty much across the board. So you're not able to recover or protect yourself against that oxidative stress quite as much. And all of those things compile and then lead to, oh man, I'm just getting old, and that's why I can't, perform as great. And that's what we set out here to kind of prevent. And I always say that you're lucky if you come here because you've found the fountain of youth. And in a way, that is true. We've seen things, everything from bone density improving, muscle improving, and all that is supposedly very hard after you get to 40.
I've seen people in strategy sessions decreasing the amount of heart medication they're on, potentially diabetic medication they're on, all just through more intentional dietary choices, but also of strength training and cardiovascular training as a whole. Also pulling that back a little bit, oxidative stress is just like that slow creep that we get with time. We can't really avoid it totally because life happens, like the toxins all throughout the world, the smog, all of those things are just slowly wearing on our cells, and that's what oxidative stress is. It's really, you can't do anything about it. It's more about slowing it as best as you can, and then making better choices to where it's not as detrimental to you.
Exactly, yeah.
But it does build up with time. So talking about that, you got to be a little bit more intentional. We did mention that after 40, there is your body becomes less responsive to the protein and to strength training and hypertrophy training. So ultimately, it's called anabolic resistance. And frankly, that doesn't really matter. It just matters that you're aware it is harder. That doesn't mean what you're doing doesn't work. It just means you probably need to just do it better and with more intent. What would you say if someone comes in and they're like, I feel like I'm eating great, I'm training hard? What would you usually approach first when you talk to someone about that, of like coaching them through how to actually see results?
Yeah, well, a lot of times I have to ask people more specifically what they mean by that. So, there's one member here who, when I asked about protein consumption, he assured me that he definitely gets enough protein. I'm like, okay, awesome. And I could have just left it at that. I'm like, all right, cool, you get your 30. But what he actually meant, and I'm not trying to pick on him, this was a real conversation, but the only protein he was getting in the morning was from bacon. And I'm not going to lie, it was a good amount of it. But that is not a good source of protein. And so I would say my first response to that is those terms of I'm eating pretty well and I'm working out hard are very relative. So people often underestimate how much protein they're getting. They underestimate how many calories they're actually eating, and they overestimate how much exertion they're exerting during their workouts and training. And so getting down to the nitty-gritty of what they mean and what they think training hard and eating clean means is the first step to that.
Okay. And when you're working with someone and they come to you and they're like, I'm having bacon for breakfast, do you think it's important to just swap that out or do immediate, like, this is what we're doing, ask more questions? Like, how do you work with someone who may not know what they need or really what's in food?
Well, for the way that we do things at Peak City Gym is I would, before we even start that strategy session, especially if I know that they want to talk about nutrition, then I want them to get a body metrics done. So body composition analysis, where we're going to see your muscle percentage, your fat percentage, and then we're going to see what's called your basal metabolic rate.
Yeah.
And so the basal metabolic rate is an important number because that's the amount of calories that it takes for you to maintain your weight. So not maintain your body composition, but just maintain your weight if you were to sit there in a chair and breathe all day, right? So bare minimum calories to keep you functioning at the weight that you're at right then. And then what we also see is your total energy expenditure. Now that's an estimate, but it's based on your muscle percentage, how active you are, which we determine in a little interview before the body metrics is actually done. But that'll give us a range of calories that we want to operate in. Now, if we're looking for more optimization, which is what our upcoming workshop is going to be about, is optimizing your nutrition, then we want to look at those numbers and coach within that range and meet them where they're at. So if they're already eating a bunch of bacon for breakfast and they love bacon, right? There's nothing inherently wrong about bacon, but it has to fit into the big picture. So we'll often break it down, and they don't even have to pay attention to calories once they leave the strategy session. That's more of what our job is. We'll look at the calories, we'll break it down into macronutrients, and we know that there's a certain amount of protein that when you're sitting down and eating, not even lifting, but you can achieve muscle protein synthesis. And so that's really the first place I start as like, okay, bacon has some protein, not the greatest of quality. What else can we add in? Maybe they like eggs. Maybe they don't like eggs. Maybe it is Greek yogurt, something else that has protein in it. And specifically, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but an amino acid called leucine has to be in that protein to get the signaling down so that you're actually getting into muscle protein synthesis.
And muscle protein synthesis, real quick, is just your body getting signaled that we need to start building muscle. So you need to hit a bare minimum of protein amount, but also leucine amount, which is an amino acid, just a building block within protein that you need to hit in order to signal your body to utilize the protein and the amino acids in actually building muscle. So it is important that the 30 grams are generally hit and you're looking for those leucine-rich protein sources. Why is it important that we become aware of the challenges as we age, that it becomes harder to eat enough protein or to build that muscle? Why does it matter that we even care about that?
Yeah, well, from a pure physical standpoint, I mean, you have to be strong in order to continue on with your independent living. So that's number one, is most people want to continue to do what they're already doing with as little assistance or interference as possible. So have to maintain strength for that. The second thing that we want to remember is that muscle is, number one, it's your glucose disposal system. So basically, when we're eating some of these higher sugar foods or these carbs that'll be broken down into glucose, we need to be insulin sensitive, and that glucose needs to be shuttled into the muscle cells. Insulin also helps prevent the breakdown of muscle. Right. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to build a whole lot of muscle just because we've added carbs and we're insulin sensitive. But we need to make sure that as we age and we're losing muscle and we're becoming less active, that we're not contributing to that insulin resistance by not getting enough protein. So maintaining your muscle mass and eating enough protein to make sure you're doing it helps you to become, or it helps you to stay or become more insulin sensitive, number one. Number two, we got to remember that muscle is broken down into amino acids and sent to the rest of the body where, as we've talked about, oxidative stress has occurred. So not only is it important for your glucose disposal system, but it's important for the healthy maintenance of all your other organs, whether that be your heart, your liver, your kidneys, whatever it is. Your body's going to break down that muscle tissue if there's not sufficient protein and amino acids coming in through the diet to then go and repair those other vital organs so that you can continue to survive. So yeah, it's really about survivability, insulin sensitivity, and then being able to continue to do the things that you love to do.
Yeah, it has such a big impact, and I guess saying the same thing, but in different terms, like your metabolism, that's going to be a big part of your insulin sensitivity. You will, in theory, burn more calories the more muscle you have. At just going back to our basal metabolic rate, will burn more calories throughout the day without doing any extra effort. So it makes it easier to maintain an ideal weight or an ideal body composition when you have a little bit more muscle on your body. It's also going to help provide you with more energy. Things will be easier because you have more muscle and more strength, so you don't have to work as hard. It's not as close to the maximum effort throughout your day. And then it's also just that metabolic armor, because so many of the, Dr. Peter Attia calls it like the 4 horsemen: metabolic disease, which is usually like a diabetes type disease, Alzheimer's, cardiac, and
I can't remember the fourth cardiac. I was going to say cardiac.
There's one more. But those, so Dr. Peter Attia talks about these a lot, and he calls it the 4 horsemen. You have cancer, heart disease, neurodegenerative or Alzheimer's type diseases, and then metabolic diseases. Those are all counteracted by having more muscle. We can have better glucose sensitivity and insulin sensitivity with more muscle. So that's working on the diabetes and fatty liver. Alzheimer's is also kind of linked with potentially being a type 3 diabetes, just how our body processes the glucose and sugar in our body. And then also heart disease. When we're more fit, when we're more active, our heart is healthier and we're less likely to get cardiovascular diseases. And then cancer, if you're just generally healthier, you're generally less likely to get cancer. We don't necessarily always understand why cancer happens to people, but generally when we're healthier, we are better at managing the cell turnover and less likely to have cancer. So these different things are all the most common ways people die as we age, and having our muscle and building muscle is going to help prevent a lot of those illnesses that most people start to really dip off.
Or at least blunt some of the symptoms of that as well.
It makes us stronger to like actually survive a lot of those diseases.
Oh yeah, survivability goes way up when you have the good amount of muscle mass.
So we recently just saw RFK and his group come out with new protein recommendations. Could we talk a little bit about what it went up to and why it is important that the general population's kind of becoming more aware of how important protein is?
Oh yeah, I definitely think that the nation is becoming more aware of it. I think to understand why there's changes in the protein recommendations, you have to understand where the original recommendations came from. And it was really about nitrogen balance. It was not about optimization of muscle or amino acids or anything like that. It was mainly like, okay, how much do you sweat and urinate, and how do we achieve nitrogen balance, you know, to make sure that you're intaking enough protein that you're not excreting all of the nitrogen out. So that was really where the recommendations come from. Now that we've moved into, like you're talking about, fighting off those 4 horsemen and other things, people are realizing like, okay, it's not just about nitrogen balance. Like protein is far more important than that. So I can't even remember what the actual new numbers are, but it's still, I think, lower than what we say is
that was
as
another
fitness
thing
professionals.
I wanted to talk about. The new numbers, so people know, is a range of 0.5 to 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. So if you're 100 pounds, that just makes the math super easy for me. It's 50 grams to 70 grams, which for a lot of members and people I've spoken to in strategy sessions, that's still hard for a lot of them to achieve on a daily basis. And most of them are over 100 pounds.
I think I don't even know where I got the statistics from, but I know that it pretty much lines up with what I've seen in strategy sessions, that most people over 40 typically are only getting around 40 to 60 grams of protein a day. And if that's not a nationwide statistic, it certainly applies to what we see at Peak City
I think
Gym.
with this demographic, that's pretty, with the over 40 demographic.
And most of our clients do not weigh 80 to 120 pounds, which would be drastically unhealthy for most people anyway. So I'm not even suggesting that we get down to that. What I'm saying is that we're just severely and chronically undernourished when it comes to protein.
And do you feel like this is enough of a change, or it's just kind of movement in the right direction? Because we always promote typically around 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Yeah, well, so I think it just depends. The people that are talking to us are usually interested in, they may not follow through on everything, but they're usually interested in optimizing their health. Anytime the government comes out with stuff, it's rarely about optimization, and it's hard to do that anyway because you're talking to a nation of people. So there's a lot of different, cultural things and backgrounds and all sorts of different things that you're dealing with. We have people that are vegans, and so if you say a certain amount of protein to them, in terms of bioavailability, which just means that your body's ability to use something, you're not able to use plant protein the way that you are animal protein. So even saying that blanket statement of these are the protein recommendations, you have to be more specific about what sources of protein you're talking about. If we're talking about muscle protein synthesis and we're talking about leucine, well, there's certainly protein sources that do not include leucine.
Yeah.
Some plant sources do, but again, we have to think about the bioavailability. And so that's where I think like it is a step in the right direction, but I don't think that it's complete. And I don't think that we'll ever have recommendations for the nation that are considered for optimization rather than just, hey, this is what you need to survive and be relatively healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does fall a little bit short in the amount, but then also in the direction of the guidance, because it just says the 0.5 to 0.7 when we're typically around 1 gram per pound of body weight. But then it also doesn't mention complete proteins or the protein source. The bioavailability with vegetable protein, for those that don't know, essentially means like you have 10 grams of animal protein, which is generally about 90 to 95% available. You're going to get 9.5 grams of protein that your body can actually use versus vegetable protein, or most vegetable proteins, you're more going to be around 40%. So you'll get 4 grams of protein for your 10 grams of consumption. So that's really where bioavailability comes down. Your body's just not able to process a lot of the protein when it is all coming from vegetable sources.
Not only the source of protein matters, but what we were just talking about earlier in terms of insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, those things also affect your bioavailability. So on an individual level, if you're somebody who is already pre-diabetic or diabetic, you're going to have a harder time utilizing that protein you're ingesting than somebody who's leaner and does not have that insulin resistance. Yeah. So not only does the source of protein matter, but your state, your physical state and physiological state matters as well.
Because someone who's 300 or 400 pounds, 1 gram of protein per body weight, that's 300 to 400 grams of protein. That's far too much. Generally speaking, when we have someone of that size, you're going to look more at their ideal weight and do 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of ideal weight. So if they're 300 and they want to weigh 200, you're going to do 180 to 200 grams. Yeah. Just some quick maths there.
And if somebody is, just for quick, I know you know this, but if somebody does come in and let's say they're eating only 40 to 60 grams of protein per day, but they should be eating closer to 150, we don't just the next day tell them, oh, all right, start eating 150 grams of protein. One, that would cause some gastrointestinal distress for sure.
It'd be pretty gassy.
It would also be very overwhelming and intimidating to then sit there and look at all that food that you're supposed to be eating now. So typically, and if you do a strategy session, which I encourage everyone to do, even if they're not members, we'll do it for non-members as well. But we want to make sure that we're slowly building them up to that optimal protein level. So that way we're not creating those issues and not getting burnt out on food and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
I usually have people, if I'm working with someone specifically, I'll usually have them add 1 more serving in, whatever that is, in one meal. So if you're having the average of whatever 40 grams, so 15 per meal, I'd add another 15 grams in, or another meal, and just eventually work up from there, see how things handle, how full they are, and then work progressively up and slowly adding more and more and more, and hopefully getting to that 30 grams per meal.
Do you make that, when you add servings, do you cut stuff out at all, or do you instruct to cut out?
I never pull things away when I'm doing nutrition coaching. I always add things in, and naturally things tend to fall off because there's only so much space in the belly. Yep. Like, instead of telling people to eat more protein and or telling people to cut out all of the candy and snacks and things, I'm like, how about we just add some more protein in our dinners, or add more vegetables in our dinners or meals, and generally speaking, they'll be too full to go into their snacks.
Yeah. Yep. I also like to instruct, and I'm sure you do the same thing, since we're prioritizing protein, eat that first. Because like you said, once you hit those goals, then you're good to go. The other benefit to eating the protein first is the fact that it will actually lower your blood sugar And then when you do eat some of that carby stuff later and your blood sugar rises back up, it's rising probably way less above baseline than it would have originally. That's what a lot of the studies say right now. I'm not sure how it works where if you spike your blood sugar first and then try to eat protein, I'm not sure how much it blunts it or what the nutrient timing there is. But I do know that a lot of studies have indicated to go ahead and eat the protein first and then switch to the carby stuff, which is pretty easy for me. I like to do it that way anyway.
It helps with the volume of food you eat too. Protein's very satiating. It's very filling. So you eat that protein first, you're far less likely to grossly overeat any other high-calorie foods, even
Actually,
if it does taste good.
Funny story. So when Brendan and I go down to Orlando for the gym mastermind stuff, we typically go to Fogo de Chao at least one night, which is a Brazilian steakhouse. And one day we were, at Fogo de Chao, and of course we skip there, like, offer you the salad bar and all this other stuff. Like, no, all right, that's free and complimentary. You just bring over the meat and we'll eat that. And so we were eating copious amounts of meat. I mean, it was like disgusting levels because, one, we hadn't eaten all day. We were stuck in this seminar. And two, we're at a Brazilian steakhouse. You got to capitalize. And so I look at Brendan at one point, and we weren't drinking or anything. We rarely drink anyway. Not that I'm against it, but we just weren't. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, are you feeling like a little bit like lightheaded or buzzed or something? And he was like, I mean, yeah, kinda. And so we looked it up, and it's actually called meat drunk. And you can Google it. Google on meat drunk. I don't know exactly what websites will show up, but it is one thing that, like, if you eat copious amounts of protein like we were and nothing else, your blood sugar will crash and you will feel a little bit like buzzed and drunk. So naturally we had to get the chocolate lava cake for dessert just to even things out. Yeah, bring us back to baseline, sober us up a bit. But yeah, anyway, protein will lower your blood sugar, and then you can eat some of that carby stuff after with minimal impact to spiking your blood sugar.
Assuming people aren't going to Brazilian steakhouses on a regular basis, how do you actually recommend structuring your day around hitting our protein targets?
Yeah, so if you're not going to go to a Brazilian steakhouse, so typically what I like to do when I'm nutrition coaching, everybody's a little bit different, but I do like to space out the protein as much as possible. If they're a breakfast eater, it makes things a lot easier. A lot of our people are not breakfast eaters, so it does make it a little bit harder because now you're trying to eat more protein throughout the day. So typically I like to get to that 30 grams at each meal. So if you eat 3 meals, that's already 90 grams right there. So we're already above the 40 to 60 that most people are eating. And then if we can throw in some other snacks, whether it be chomps, Greek yogurt, almonds, other things that have just even a little bit of protein in there, everything counts. Yeah. Right. So not every time we're eating are we necessarily trying to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Sometimes we're also thinking about the amino acid factor of like, hey, I need this 10-gram chomp stick because I need protein, but I really need the amino acids from that protein to make sure I'm not going to be breaking down muscle when something else goes wrong in my body.
I agree with that. I think spacing it out, usually if you win your breakfast, if you eat breakfast, if you win that, meaning you hit your protein targets, that's just making the rest of your day so much easier. Whenever I do nutrition coaching in a strategy session, they're coming in and they're like, I just can't hit my protein target. And we break down their day and like when they're eating and the amounts they're eating, and they're hitting the 30, sometimes even 40 grams in the last 2 meals, but they just can't get above 80 or 90. And I'm like, honestly, I understand it's hard to eat breakfast, but if you win that breakfast, if all you eat is protein for breakfast, like it doesn't have to be a big meal, but all you eat is protein, you're already setting yourself up for success later on in the day. And it's less daunting to try and compress 150 plus grams of protein in 3 or 4 meals than it is to compress 150 in 2 meals.
Yeah.
So.
Well, not only that, but it just works better with our circadian rhythm. And then we talked a little bit about insulin. Most people that are listening to this or that will come to the workshop will have also heard at least about cortisol. And so cortisol gets a bad rap because it's considered the stress hormone and the weight gaining hormone, but you actually need cortisol.
Yeah.
And so cortisol wakes you up in the morning, right? And then it decreases, or it's supposed to decrease throughout the day. And then you're supposed to be able to fall asleep. Because of all the things that we do, artificial lights and work stress and texting on our phones, and we're always accessible to everything, we've kind of warped our cycle of cortisol. And cortisol and insulin actually have an inverse relationship. So when cortisol is high, our insulin sensitivity is low, meaning we're more insulin resistant in the morning. So a lot of times people will be like, well, I eat oatmeal, or I had a banana and this and that. It's like, well, you want something that is actually going to not spike your blood sugar because you're more insulin resistant. That's where protein comes in. Protein will also help you maintain that circadian rhythm, so you're not spiking your blood sugar and cortisol all at different times, leading to a nice wave throughout the day where you're getting these crashes and then bursts of energy. So if you're somebody who has trouble sleeping at night, or wakes up throughout the night and has trouble going back to sleep, a lot of times if you eat breakfast or change up what your breakfast is to something that's higher protein, you're over the long term, right? It's not going to happen tomorrow, but over the long term, you're going to start seeing some of those changes in your energy levels and your quality of sleep as well.
Yeah. Last thing, we have seen an explosion of protein products or products consuming protein. And it, like, my girlfriend the other day was buying things, and she was buying snacks for my nephew, my 12 and a half year old nephew, coming over to the house. And she saw that they had protein Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
And granted, it was more protein than a Pop-Tart, but it was still the same number of carbohydrates or sugar. And all it had was like 7 grams of protein. To me or you, like, obviously that doesn't constitute it to be a protein source.
Right.
Same thing with peanut butter, but that's less egregious because it's not labeled as a protein source generally.
Not usually.
But can you talk a little bit about how the explosion of protein, whether you feel like it may be a fad, that protein is now the primary talking point for most people in nutrition?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, when everything on social media is telling people they need to focus on protein and this and that, I mean, there's people that get paid hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, or agencies that get paid that for marketing, right? So when they're like, great source of protein, like, I mean, that's easy to put on any box, and whoever at Kellogg's at Pop-Tarts can just say that with 9 grams, like, it does have more protein than any other toaster pastry. Like, that's awesome, but that doesn't mean that it's a good source of protein. One, I would say you have to look at all the rest of the nutrition facts. So if it's like 7 grams of protein with 30 grams of fat and 20 grams of carbs, well, there's a lot more calories coming from the other things than there is going to be the protein. So what is the big picture there? Yes, you got 7 grams of protein that you otherwise wouldn't have, but you probably got 400 calories worth of crap that you also didn't want to get. So definitely look at that. I'd say at this point, you can probably just bet if something is advertising that it's a good source of protein and it's less than like 15 grams, it's probably not great.
Yeah.
Chomps excluded and things like that, because like obviously that's almost nothing else except
The volume
exclusive.
of it's just smaller.
Exactly. So protein bars, kind of the same thing, but those can turn into candy bars real quick.
Protein bars drive me crazy.
Yeah.
I like, even right now, it's massive marketing. Everything is protein. But back in my day, I don't know, like 10 plus years ago, when I was just getting into fitness, like protein bars were kind of coming out, and you get them in grocery stores. But it was 20, 25 grams of protein, but 40 to 50 grams of sugar.
Yeah.
And like, not just carbohydrates, but like sugar.
Yeah.
And I always thought when I was having these, like, I'm getting my protein source in, but then I actually looked at the label and I was like, this is a candy bar with some extra protein. And I think that's really where, like, this whole idea of just throw protein in something, and you're going to make a lot more money and you'll be able to charge a lot more for it.
Well, that, and people think that it's healthy.
Yeah. Whey protein is not that expensive.
Yeah, no.
But companies will throw whey protein in something and charge you $4 to $5 or 4 to 5 times more than what their non-protein source would be, when a scoop of whey protein is like 25 cents.
Yeah, no, and you really don't need much more, especially for our demographic. I mean, you can get into the nuances of protein powders and all that, but our people don't really need more than whey unless they have a dietary issue or something like that. I will say though that I've read, I've never heard of this supplement company, but apparently this was being marketed as like this great tasting protein and all this. And apparently most of it, when they compared ingredients and the levels of it, was essentially cake batter. And
I wonder why it tastes
apparently when you add milk and drink it through a straw, it tastes delicious. So I just, be cautious when something tastes too good to be true. It probably is. But also, it is okay to have like the shakes that you were talking about. Like, okay, maybe 50 grams of sugar and stuff isn't great. However, some of the ones that are like, this one, it's a little bit extra sugar. Is it worth it? Well, again, look at the bigger picture. Not everything is inherently good or inherently bad. But when you're talking about getting off a track and all that stuff, whether it's vacations or holidays or whatever, you're really only on one track. You only have one life, so you're always on the track. You just have to account for some of those things. If you like that particular shake that's a little higher in sugar, awesome. Then probably later on in the day or earlier in the day, you're going to eat something that's less sugar.
Yeah.
So it's really about looking at the big picture. Don't get lost in the forest by looking at the trees. You have to see everything for what it is and see how the puzzle pieces fit together. And I think that's where people get frustrated as they try to pigeonhole everything and they're looking at like, well, what about, is this the best snack right now? Like, I don't know. Look at the big picture of what else you've been eating. You can probably afford to have that snack if you're, on point the rest of the time.
And that ties in, I feel like ties in really well to our upcoming workshop next Thursday, February 5th. Where we put out this this form where you can sign up, and I'll link it down below, where we ask people kind of what they want to know. And we listed out a couple things, like we're going to talk about supplements. We're going to talk about optimizing your nutrition. And one of the most popular questions we got was timing of supplements.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely discuss that in the workshop. But like, again, that's the getting lost in the forest, staring at the trees. Like, that's not necessarily the biggest brick that we can approach. But if you're interested, check out the link below. I will link our form. Come by to the gym. It's totally free. It's going to be about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on question sides of things. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, totally free. And we look forward to seeing you guys there.
And there will be giveaways as well. So make sure you show up. You might win some of those supplements that you'll now know exactly when to take them.
Treats. Yep. I love treats. All right. Well, I appreciate you for listening in on this episode of the Longevity Lab. I hope you guys learned a little bit something. If you could like and share this video to anyone you think could benefit from it, that would be awesome. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next one.